I'm a creative consultant and writer living in LA, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Kristine for several years now, and recently interviewed her for my Substack newsletter called Duende. I'll put that link in the chat if anyone is interested in reading that. I know some of you may have come over here from that as well. But it was a really special conversation for both of us. And afterwards, Kristine led me through a short self compassion practice. And we thought it would be really fun and meaningful to bring our various communities together and hold space and learn and practice a little bit on self compassion together. So, thank you all again. Feel free to write in the chat. You can be on video, you can turn your screen off, whatever you feel comfortable with. There's no right or wrong here. But I'm gonna pass things over to Kristine. But I wrote out her bio. She's a woman of many talents, so I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm gonna read part of her bio, and then I'll let her kind of take over from here. Kristine is a certified educator and coach of compassion and mindfulness through Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. She was previously on the leadership team at the nonprofit called the Global Compassion Coalition, and is currently a creative producer and coach, helping individuals get unstuck, whether it be moving through cycles of stress and burnout, cultivating a sense of self-worth, or navigating conflict with others. She is the author of the ebook, which I have read and love, highly recommend, titled Taking Compassionate Action, a compassionate guide to navigating burnout, imposter syndrome, and difficult conversations to further resilience, take action, and create positive change. So thank you all, and thank you, Kristine.
Yay, thank you for such a nice introduction, Elise.
Of course.
So happy to be here with everyone. Such a good turnout too on a Friday morning. I was not expecting this many people. But I wanted to start out with a couple of questions to reflect on. So if you want to, you can get a pen and pencil, or you can just kind of mentally reflect on these questions just for a minute or so. So first, think about various times you were struggling in some way. You had a misfortune, failed, or felt inadequate. How do you typically respond to yourself in these situations? What do you say to yourself? What tone do you use? What's your posture? Do you have any nonverbal gestures that you can think of? And I'll just give you like maybe 30 seconds to a minute to kind of think about this. And then next, we're going to do the same thing, but for a loved one. So think about various times when someone you loved was struggling in some way, had a misfortune, failed, or felt inadequate. How do you typically respond to your friends or loved ones in such situations? What do you say? What tone do you use? What kind of posture do you have? Any nonverbal gestures? And then finally, consider the differences between how you treat your close friends or loved ones when they're struggling and how you treat yourself. Do you notice any patterns? What differences stand out to you? And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see you all again. And I would love to just allow like a minute or so if you want to take kind of the reflection of this small exercise and either put a couple words in the chat of what you noticed, or if you feel comfortable, you can raise your hand or unmute and share kind of like what you noticed or what came up for you through this. I'm far kinder to others than I am to myself. Yep, that's pretty typical. I think I'm generally much harder on myself than others. Yeah, I feel like that's a very common theme with doing this practice. More compassionate with others.
I also find for me that I tend to isolate a lot when I'm feeling like bad about myself or like I messed up or, and then with my loved ones, of course I want to like be there for them. And it's like a good reminder to not isolate.
Absolutely. Yep, we got some people agreeing with you, more generous with my loved ones, feels more natural to comfort others, empathetic to others, and harsh with myself. And that's absolutely like normal for everyone. When people do this exercise, I think most people are really shocked at how badly they treat themselves compared to their friends and loved ones. And if you are one of those people, which it seems like most people are, you're not alone. A lot of preliminary data actually suggests that the vast majority of people are more compassionate to others than themselves. And our culture doesn't really encourage us to be kind to ourselves, and neither does our negativity bias, which is an evolutionary trait we have. So we need to intentionally practice changing our relationship with ourselves in order to counter the habits of a lifetime. So don't feel bad about it at all. Self-compassion is one of those things that, like, when I first learned about it, I was like, oh, you can do that. You can treat yourself that way. And when we criticize ourselves, we're tapping into our body's threat defense system, which is also known as our sympathetic nervous system and our fight, flight, freeze response. And among the ways we can react to perceived danger, the threat defense system is the quickest and most easily triggered. So this means that self-criticism is often our first reaction when things go wrong. And I see a question in the chat of what is negativity bias. And it's actually very interesting. It's an evolutionary trait that we've had since like we were in hunter-gatherer bands. So basically, once we were living out in the wilds, if you heard a sound, like you were very attuned to anything negative that was happening around you because it helped you survive. So if you heard a snap of a twig in the woods or out in like the prairie or field, and it's a bear or a lion, you would be really attuned to that and be able to fight, flight, or freeze, to survive and get out of that. And then once you were able to escape, the stress response would complete. So the stress cycle would be finished and you would return to rest and digest, where your nervous system was in a calm state. So it's a really, really helpful trait. It's just that nowadays, we don't have those kinds of threats. The system works really well for protecting against threats to our physical bodies. But nowadays, most of the threats we face are challenges to our self-image or our self-concept, which is really hard because it's really, really difficult to complete those stress cycles. And when we don't complete a stress cycle, and it can lead to chronic stress, burnout, and other health issues. So self-compassion is one way that we can transform our stress responses into nurturing ones, by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the caregiving system in our bodies, and it gives us a sense of safety and resourcefulness. Someone shared, a friend taught me something to work with negativity bias, which is asking myself, what's the best thing that could happen? And that is really, really great advice. And there's actually been some research. I think it was the University of Washington. It's by the Gottmans, who many of you have probably heard of. And I think it takes 5 positive things to counter a negative thing, especially in a relationship. So if like your partner says something that really bugs you, you're probably going to fixate on that, even if they say 5 nice things to you throughout the day. So we really have to work to rewire our brains to kind of navigate through this negativity bias we have. And I really like that question, which is, what's the best thing that could happen? So now I guess I'll share what self-compassion is. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the care and concern you would give to a friend when confronted with personal inadequacies, mistakes, failures, and painful life situations. It consists of 3 interacting components, which have a positive and negative pole. So we have self-kindness versus self-judgment, a sense of common humanity versus isolation, and mindfulness versus over-identification. Self-compassion is precisely the opposite of our typical reaction to internal threat. self-criticism, self-isolation, and self-absorption. And there are three components. First one is self-kindness, which refers to being caring and understanding with yourself rather than harshly judgmental. Instead of attacking or berating ourselves for our personal shortcomings, we offer ourselves warmth and unconditional acceptance. And then it also includes common humanity, which involves recognizing that all human beings are imperfect, that all people fail, make mistakes, and have serious life challenges. By remembering that imperfection is a part of life, we feel less isolated when we're in pain. And then the third component is mindfulness. And in the context of self-compassion, it involves being aware of our painful experiences in a balanced way that neither ignores or avoids or exaggerates our painful thoughts and emotions. And then now I'm going to run you through just a short practice. And I'll just give you a moment to get comfortable in your seat. Maybe close your eyes if you're comfortable, or you can shift your gaze downward just so that you can really focus on the practice. And we're just going to start by taking one really deep breath, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. So think of a difficult situation or a challenge in your life that is causing you stress in the moment. And if you're new to this practice, it's better to choose something that is moderately difficult in your life rather than something overwhelming. Bring the situation to mind and remember what happened or what you think might happen in the future if this situation is ongoing. Now say silently to yourself, "This is a moment of suffering." Acknowledging this is a form of mindfulness, of noticing what is going on for you emotionally in the present moment without judging that experience as positive or negative. You can also say to yourself, "This is hard," or "This is stress." Use whatever statement feels most natural to you. Next, say silently to yourself, "Suffering is a part of life." This is a recognition of your common humanity with others, that all people have difficulties and challenges, and these experiences give you something in common with the rest of humanity rather than mark you as abnormal or deficient. Other options for this statement include, "Other people know what I'm feeling in this moment." "I'm not alone." Or, "We all have struggles in our lives." Now put your hands over your heart or somewhere on your body that feels comforting to you. Another option is to shift your attention to the feeling of your feet on the floor or your seat in the chair. Notice the warmth of your hands on your body, whether it's your hands on your chest, in your lap, or maybe notice the sense of support underneath you, whether it's your seat or your feet on the floor. Say silently to yourself, may I be kind to myself. You can also consider whether there is a more specific phrase that would speak to you and your current situation. Some examples might be, may I give myself the compassion that I need? May I accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? And may I be a friend unto myself? This practice can be used any time of day or night. If you practice it in moments of relative calm, it might be easier for you to experience these three parts of self-compassion: mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness when you need them the most. And after just a few more seconds, maybe you can start to stretch, roll your shoulders, wiggle your fingers and toes, and open your eyes at your own pace. We'll just take a moment to reflect on how this experience of this exercise was for you. How did you feel? Did one of the three components of self-compassion feel more powerful than others for you? Or was there anything you noticed or were surprised by? You can either share in the chat, or you can also raise your hand and share with the group. And if you have any questions as well, this is a great time to raise your hand and ask them, or put them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer. Looks like we still have 8 minutes, and I'm happy to stay on after as well if anyone has questions or thoughts or wants to just connect and converse. We have a raised hand. Let's see. Perfect. I'll ask you to unmute, and I'm going to remove the spotlight from myself. There we go.
Hey, sorry. I work a lot with teens, and I think this is such a useful practice. I just wanted to make sure I got it right. So there's like the mindfulness component of saying like this is suffering. And then there's realizing it's common humanity, like a shared experience. And then what was the third part of this?
The third part is like a self-kindness. So that's the putting your hand on your chest or in your lap, giving yourself a hug. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with touch, so I also like to offer the putting your feet and feeling the support beneath your feet on the floor or the seat of your chair. And saying phrases like, may I be kind to myself, may I forgive myself, may I give myself the compassion I need. I also have this practice written out in my ebook, and my ebook is free on my website, so you can look at it there. There's also a recording of it there, so if you ever want to download it and use it for anything, you can do that as well.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I love the idea of using this for teens. I wish that I would have had access to something like this when I was a
Yeah.
teenager.
I feel like we do a lot of like addressing the common humanity, but I always feel like there's a little bit of something missing to like complete the whole thing, you know? And
Mhm.
I do think it's like combating affirmations, like may I be kind to myself. We talk a lot about not paying for it twice, which
Mm,
is the idea of like if you mess up, you pay for it, and you don't have to be like doubly cruel to yourself.
yeah.
But yeah, I love this practice. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing with teens too.
Someone said it felt like I had a warm hug, which is how I felt too. I think it's really beautiful and impactful to take those moments for ourselves, especially amidst busy lives. And it's always so nice to slow down and acknowledge how I'm feeling and where I'm at in the moment, and allow grace for that too. So thank you.
Absolutely. I remember that was my like immediate reaction to this practice too, was it felt like not only a warm hug, but a warm hug from myself, which I'm not used to giving myself. I'm so used to self-criticism and um, at least my generation, I feel like we were really pushed with self-esteem. And like your self-esteem will get stronger if you succeed, and it really forces you to compare yourself to yourself and compare yourself to others, where self-compassion more gives you the opportunity to relate to yourself and relate to others. And I think that that's just really powerful for me. And let's see, I see a question in the chat from Michaela. I'm looking forward to reading your ebook. Do you have recommendations for other resources to learn more about this concept / practice? Yes, absolutely. A huge like acknowledgement needs to go out to Dr. Kristine and Dr. Chris Germer, who are kind of like the pioneers of the self-compassion research that's being done. I think Kristine Neff's website is selfcompassion.org. I will look it up and put it in the chat. I already have it like in my browser, of course. I typed it in and it just completes. They have a ton of information on their website, and they also have a few books. I think there's Kristine Neff's book. I'm looking to see if I have it in my bookshelf over here. I think it's just called Self-Compassion. And then Chris Germer also has a book, and they have a book together, the Self-Compassion Workbook, which is really great. It runs you through a lot of different self-compassion practices in like a workbook format. There's also a lot of different trainings and courses you can take on it. But I think the selfcompassion.org might be the best resource for learning more about self-compassion. Antonia shared that the questions that I asked during the exercise caught her off guard. I was not expecting to be stunned with my own reactions to them. I can definitely relate to that. It's nice to stop spinning in my head. A reminder to breathe and acknowledge that there is something causing me stress instead of just trying to barrel through. Yes, that's like especially true for the mindfulness part. It kind of pauses you in your tracks and stops you from ruminating.
Well, it seems like it helps get you out of that like fight, flight, freeze thing too, to like actually pause and acknowledge the difficult feeling, which is important.
Definitely, it snaps you out of it. And one thing I also want to share while we have just like a couple more minutes is that compassion is often kind of seen as like a soft skill or even a little woo-woo because it seems more feminine in a way. And compassion, like the actual definition of compassion, is very action oriented towards suffering specifically. So if you or a friend or someone in the world is suffering, sorry, there's a big honking horn outside my window. Compassion requires you to actually like notice the suffering, you're aware of it, you feel it in your body, and then you actually have a willingness to take action. So I see that more as like a hard skill, like you're actually doing something to alleviate suffering, whether it's for yourself or others. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can be soft with yourself and be with yourself by comforting, soothing, and validating ourselves. But we can also like act in the world by protecting and providing and motivating ourselves. Like if I fail, I'm not just comforting myself and saying like, oh, you failed, that's really hard. I'm also saying, okay, you failed, that's really hard. So what can we do to make this not happen again? Or what can we do to, improve next time? And I think that's really powerful to have a skill like this that also takes you through like the next steps instead of getting you stuck in like the cycle of self-criticism as a motivator. So yeah, that is my little spiel. We got a question from Libby asking if we think we'll continue to host these meetings, and that is actually something we've been talking about. So I think that we might make this a regular thing. Not sure how often. If you have any thoughts or recommendations for like how often you would like meetings like this, like we are all ears. This is really just nice to be in community with all of you, and it feels good to share this practice too.
Yes, a perfect way to kick off the weekend too. So thank you.
Definitely. I love doing this on a Friday. And thank you all for being here.
It was so nice to share this space together, and I hope you all have a really great weekend.